Beneath the frigid Baltic lies an enigmatic wreck, a rusting hulk, one of the last great mysteries of the Second World War.
This is what we came here for. It's only the wreck that tells the last line of the story.
Nobody knew that it existed.
I could actually see the U-boat lying on its side, and I was looking at it like, wow.
It was one of the last Nazi U-boats to disappear under the waves. Its commander was found, but the boat and its crew were never seen again.
Those guys don't know what hit them.
This is the story of a stunning find by a dedicated group of divers, determined to crack an enigma that endured since 1945. He was among the last to fall for his Führer. A U-boat commandant, his frozen body was found on a Baltic island in March 1945. His submarine and crew were presumed lost.
I received the scan of the original police report from the police constable who went to examine the body, and it was found out that it was a German Navy officer in uniform and a flotation jacket and with his dog tags, so he could absolutely positively be identified as Captain Lieutenant Wilhelm von Trotha, the commander of the U-745.
It was suspected that since the body was washed to the shores of Åland Islands, that the submarine must be also somewhere very close to that area.
The wreck of the U-745 was never found, forgotten, until a volunteer group dedicated to documenting historic wrecks made it their mission to find it.
And it needs to be done. It's no use to go out there to the sea and spend enormous amount of diesel fuel just searching for the wrong place.
They began by looking for the location of a minefield that may have sunk the U-boat. One of the region's most notorious minefields was Vanta 3. It was laid by the Finnish steamship, the Louhi, in the Gulf of Finland in January 1945.
The Louhi was laying in the minefield, and guys were on board really executing the operation. They were first-timers. None of them had been laying in minefield before. Then there were, of course, officers saying, okay, you do this and don't do anything else, but just do this. And then someone with a stopwatch saying, now it's time, and guys were able to accomplish it.
The Badavana Volunteer Dive Group pinpointed a wreck in the same spot where the Vanta 3 minefield was laid. They hoped to dive into the deep, dark water would reveal the lost hulk of the U-745, the submarine commanded by Captain Lieutenant Wilhelm von Trotha. If so, it was also the grave of 48 sailors lost in 1945.
The problem with that wreck actually has been that the visibility close to the bottom is often really poor. It's getting milkier, and some kind of clay particles are here and there, and hey, where is it? And suddenly you see this whole bow of the U-boat coming at you, and it's beautiful. It's just unreal, amazing sight.
The wreck was remarkably well preserved. The intense cold and low salinity of the Baltic kept the timbers of the wooden deck in pristine condition.
I still remember like it was yesterday. We were going down. Jussi was in front of me because he had the lights. And on that dive also, the visibility was fairly good. And I could actually see the U-boat lying on its side and this incredible mushroom type, or a funnel type, if you like, conning tower construction. And I was looking at it like, wow.
What kind of a sub is this after all? Because the conning tower, it looked like it would be like one size too big. There's a big platform with close railing in the front and double the amount of anti-aircraft weaponry. There was two twin 2-centimeter automatic guns and two single-barrel 37mm guns.
The wreck was in deep water, and the divers' time on the bottom was limited. After just 15 minutes on the wreck, they had to start decompression, allowing their bodies to gradually release potentially toxic gases accumulated during the dive.
It's kind of important to check your watch because anyway, exceeding bottom time by 1 or 2 minutes means that you have a lot more decompression to do.
Surfacing too quickly can lead to decompression sickness, or the bends, a potentially deadly condition.
Every single minute that you're longer in the bottom increases the total decompression obligation by significant amounts.
The first thing that actually came to my mind is that I had seen a line drawing of this design in one of the books. I said, hey, that's the one that's supposedly never built.
The design of the U-boat was strange. One of the German Navy's sleekest, most technically advanced vessels had been capped with a bulky conning tower that looked like a bathtub.
This kind of design was thought to be good for escorting the submarines, leaving the submarine base and heading for the patrol area. And this anti-aircraft weaponry on board was thought to be efficient to cover the submarine convoys.
The unusual design should have made identification easy, but meticulous Nazi record-keeping faltered towards the end of the war.
In the late stages of the war, a lot of modifications were carried out in the naval ports, in the shipyards, according to the skipper's wishes, or somebody just wanted to experiment.
This is typical for late war. Things developed so quickly. Nobody made any records or there's no documentation. You just built this thing and went out with it.
It turned out that the unique Nazi sub was not the U-745.
It was so unique that it wasn't supposed to have been built at all. Nobody knew that it existed. I wanted to know what the differences of those boats would be, because they didn't have numbers on the conning towers. This was so-called Turmbau 7, the conning tower model 7, which was presumably not built at all, or if it was built, probably built in a different formation.
So, I mean, that was a great, amazing, discovery when we found it. And of course, it also made this 3D modeling a little bit more challenging. There were just some sketches available. It's the only known submarine with this kind of a tower configuration, where you have around the normal tower here, you have this kind of a bathtub-like structure. And then on top of that, there's 4 anti-aircraft guns. The whole boat was just kind of a prototype. And many books and references claims that this were never taken into use. But obviously, if there's one in the Gulf of Finland, it was used.
The mystery U-boat was identified as a variation of a Type 7. Although it wasn't listed in any official German records, the dedicated Finnish team found its number.
We actually found one document of the kind of logbook entry. There was a drawing of this conning tower type, and with number used 676.
A wartime sketch in a submarine guest book confirmed that the wreck was the U-676. But the mysterious wreck of the U-745 still eluded them. "1940 was a golden year for Hitler's wolf packs. German U-boats wreaked havoc in the Atlantic. Hundreds of freighters carrying vital supplies to Britain were sunk in just 7 months. Winston Churchill declared U-boats as the greatest threat to the Allied forces.
When you look at Kriegsmarine submarines of the Second World War, they already were fairly high-tech. They would have gyro compasses, they would have different kinds of radio equipment to communicate with their headquarters. Their weapon systems already were, like they had electric torpedoes, hydroacoustically homing torpedoes and stuff like that.
Before the war, the Treaty of Versailles prohibited Germany from having submarines. But it didn't stop the secret development and testing of new designs in the 1920s and 30s. By the time the war began, the Nazi Kriegsmarine had a reliable and economic design, ready to sail into action. It was known as the Type 7, the workhorse of the Atlantic. More than 700 were rushed into service.
The southern Baltic was used as a training site for the submarine captains who were heading towards Atlantic. So first you go into a bathtub and do a little bit of training there, and then you go to
train with their little boats there, and then you go in the big business.
The U-boats were built in Bremen and launched into the Baltic for several months. A 44-man crew was trained to operate as one before being deployed into the wolf packs of the Atlantic. Those that didn't sail west stayed in the Baltic to support the savage war being waged in the east against the Soviet Union.
The Baltic Sea, for the Germany, it was very, very important to keep it enemy-free.
As a Gulf of Finland is the only sea route going to St. Petersburg, strategically it's the key for the success of Russians. Also during the Second World War, it was essential for the Russians to get their submarine fleet out from St. Petersburg to operate on the Baltic. The Baltic Sea was important to Germany for various reasons. One was the iron ore that they were getting from Sweden. It was important and essential for the war machine.
Soviets also knew very well that if they can block these iron ore shipments from Luleå to Germany, the Germans won't be able to make any more tanks. If you don't have steel, you can't make more tanks. If you don't have tanks, the situation on the Eastern Front is changing completely.
The Baltic was a rich hunting ground for the German U-boats, but many followed their victims to a watery grave. Mines were a constant threat.
When you start looking for submarines, the basic nature of that branch of military service is stealth. Nobody knows where they are. You might have a rough idea. The only way you may know that one is lost is that after a certain date, it never reports back to headquarters. It never returns.
Mines were relatively cheap, effective, and easy to lay in the shallow, stable waters of the Baltic, where tides have little effect. More than 200,000 mines were deployed in defensive lines during the Second World War.
A marine mine is a relatively cheap weapon. So what happened was that over 60,000 mines were laid in the Gulf of Finland.
At least 46 different types of mines were used, with as many as 10 different triggering mechanisms.
Finns were laying mines, Germans were laying mines here, Russians were laying mines here, and because of water depth, which is only about 100 meters at its deepest, it's kind of very favorable. Here we have a cutout in the mine showing its guts. So how does it work? Basically, the horn it's a lead horn, glass amp filled with acid, and when the submarine or something else hits into the lead part, its glass amp is breaking, and there's two metal electrodes inside here in the bottom of the cavity, and it's generating a battery.
And then we have 250 kilos TNT.
And off you go.
Having already found the wreck of one U-boat where the notorious Vanta 3 minefield once lay, the Finnish divers picked up another anomaly on the sea floor. It looked like another wreck.
That was something that first reaction was when we saw this in sonar is that there's something busted in the equipment. This can't be true. That kind of things just don't happen. First thing it was like, okay, there's some kind of cliff which is protruding from the sea bottom. It seems that there are fish nets all over the place. It might be a very dangerous place to be. I remember we were both yelling like, "Ooh," out there in pitch darkness.
It was another perfectly preserved U-boat wreck.
The whole sub is inside the clay, all the way to the conning tower. That kind of site is just insane.
Draped in fishing nets, it was one of many war graves scattered across the world's oceans. 27,000 German U-boat sailors perished in the war. They suffered the highest death rate of any branch of the German military.
Each and every wreck is a military graveyard. There were servicemen, they died in the line of duty, and you need to respect that.
To honor the fallen, the divers agreed that they would never enter such a wreck.
Imagine how the guys felt inside.
Yeah, I'm fairly confident that those guys actually don't know what hit them.
The second wreck was only a few hundred meters from their first find. Again, there was no number on the conning tower to identify it. The divers would have to record details and cross-check various records. They were hoping they'd found the enigmatic U-745. At the military archive in Helsinki, they looked for maps of known minefields and compared them to the last known location of the missing U-boat.
So what we have here is a map of Gulf of Finland. Here's Hanko, Porkkala Peninsula, and here's Estonia. And this map is showing all minefields that were laid to the western part of the Gulf of Finland during the Second World War. The minefield that Louhi was laying in January 12th, 1945, is here in the middle of mouth of the Gulf of Finland. And this is the place where the German submarine wrecks are located. It's kind of a textbook example how ships sink where the mines are. We know that the mines were in depth of 2.5 meters. We believe that the explosion took place here, somewhere around this forward torpedo compartment, and there might have been also secondary explosions from the torpedoes. And then there's only a few seconds time to react, and the ship is diving into the clay. And it's amazing. It's like in length equal to a 25-story building. And you can imagine half of it is buried in the mud. That's just unreal.
U-boat designs constantly evolved. Small variations in construction can be used to identify them.
And these flooding holes is one thing that helps us to identify the ships, the shape and the number of flooding holes in the bow section also and aft. True, the bow section is actually buried into the mud, and we were not able to see those, but we have to rely on all the other evidence that's available out there. And this is the area where another U-boat was supposed to meet U-745 They were searching from this area, but never found it.
It was the first clue that the second wreck might have been that of the U-745. Crucially, their lead researcher found a picture of the missing U-boat. It showed a distinctive metal plate or box on the conning tower. Another dive on the mystery sub, focusing on the conning tower, might confirm whether they'd found the wreck that had been lost since 1945. But in the Baltic, even the most meticulous planning can be scuppered by the weather. Rough seas and poor visibility would mean they'd have to wait another day.
Let's just have fingers crossed and hope for the weather to be.
Yeah, that's a big question. It could go anywhere from here.
As the skies turned grey and the rain came down, the dive looked doubtful. It was still dry at the harbour from where they were due to set sail, but it may have turned nasty out on the water.
It's very different out at the sea, in the middle of the Gulf, than what it is here in the coast.
One of the divers also studied meteorology. He could make his own forecast using the latest weather maps and raw wind data.
When we start diving, it's not enough that it's good weather then. We need good weather 2 hours after the diving where we are picking divers up, and that's the most critical situation. And also we need visibility at surface because there's a vivid ship traffic.
You just have to have the ship and the boat and the crew on station, and if the weather breaks, you're ready to move out. Yeah. The only thing we can do is just go out and take a look.
Time to go then.
It was the end of the diving season in Finland. Once autumn set in, temperatures would drop, making diving too risky. Despite the threat of bad weather, it was perhaps the last chance to dive on the wreck they hoped was the legendary missing German U-boat, the U-745. New members of the volunteer dive group joined the expedition.
Basically, it looks very difficult for diving right now. Big waves. And that's a problem in here, like in an ocean, you got big waves and the boat goes up the wave and down the wave, but whereas here it's very, you have very aggressive movements on the boat.
It would be a challenging start for the newcomers. Conditions at the dive site were far from ideal. Before venturing in, they reviewed the research about the mysterious wreck below.
Jussi, how can you be certain that it's U-745 and not another U-boat?
This is the only boat that was patrolling in the area which had this particular square metal plate after the conning tower.
And we saw this photograph. This very photograph is of the 745.
It would be another formidable 70-meter dive to the wreck.
676 has the railing is solid from the front part until the like after the conning tower.
Yes. And it's like a can of anchovies.
So how can you see just a box? How can you identify just a box on the wreck?
U-745 is the only ship that operated here that had this box. There were a number of other ships, U-boats that also had it, but they were operated elsewhere.
So do we know what that box is?
We don't know whether it is some kind of plate, sign or a box.
Yeah.
But it's clearly it's smoking gun because pictures show that U-745 had it and no other of these possible boats had it.
So is this the same wreck where the captain was found in the surface dead in Fögle?
Yeah,
it's the same wreck?
Exactly. From the archives, we know that the commander of U-745 was Captain Lieutenant von Trotha.
But the island where the U-boat commander's body was found was some 150 kilometers away.
When we looked into this issue more closely, we found out that actually many bodies of wrecked mariners from shipwrecks, even in more further east in Gulf of Finland, had ended up in the Åland Islands. So obviously, of course, it depends on at which depth the body is floating.
So if the U-boat was driving on the surface, how could they hit a mine? I thought U-boats are pretty shallow.
Oh no, they're not. They're not.
The U-boats have actually really deep draft because they are heavy and they must be heavy to be able to dive. So Type 7 U-boat has 5 meter draw.
Yeah, and the mines we know from the museum and from the archives, they were set at 2.5 meters depth. So it's just the right depth. So when you lose that, you get a hole in the pressure hull. The boat will just sink like a rock.
So I understood that these mines were laid by the mine layer Louhi.
Yes.
Have we found a hole or any signs of an explosion on that wreck, or are they buried in the mud?
They're buried. Obviously, it's somewhere in the bow section, front of the conning tower. Since everything else we can easily see from let's say from conning tower towards the aft, we can see everything: the bottom, the sides, the top casing. There's no superficial damage there, so it needs to be in the bow.
And that also supports the fact that this boat became nose heavy and immediately went to the bottom.
Yeah, it's glacial clay actually, and the properties of that stuff is funny. If it receives an impact, it goes liquid for a while, and it's easy to sort. If the momentum is there, you can just keep on pushing the object into the clay, and then when the movement stops, it sort of solidifies again, and that's why it's standing there.
Mercifully, the weather cleared. A reconnaissance team wasted no time in taking advantage and was soon in the water. They would test the visibility down below before the main dive team went in for a closer look.
So previously the weather didn't allow any diving operations. It was way too windy, and now the wind has calmed down significantly, so blowing all about 4 to 5 meters per second, and it seems that now we're finally able to go down there and see what we can find. The first team will be the recon team going down. 2 divers, one with camera and a dive buddy, and they're going down and checking out where the shot line is and what are the conditions, whether there are any currents and what is the visibility. And then after that, we're going down with video cameras and continue shooting according to the video plan. That's kind of very important team to go down because the security of all other divers is to some extent depend on these guys and their findings. They're going down first, and Joni decided to take his camera, and he said, okay, if visibility allows, he'd be shooting some more details. We have this giant tombstone sticking out from otherwise flat bottom. The size of the submarines, it impresses, it feels enormous. Giant piece of machinery.
Time was critical and quickly ran out at such a depth.
Their maximum time in the bottom is about 25 minutes, roughly, and the total time from surface to surface is 75 minutes.
The first group surfaced safe and bang on time.
Where's the shot? How are the conditions?
The rest of them were anxious to hear what it was like.
According to the recon divers, the visibility is good in the bottom and allows for shooting some video. And
You don't get to dive U-boats every day,
yeah.
So it's gonna be good.
Let's get ready then.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were aiming for a small box, visible in an archive photo of the U-745.
After the first divers, we hear that the visibility is really good, so we're looking forward to shoot some really good video this time and get all the details, and finally we can be sure which boat it is. The 745, if we get good footage of the fixture at the back of the flag tower. We get the chance of showing it to the entire world. It's a big thing for us. This is a 15, 20 years dream come true, really. When you go towards a little bit further down from the tip of the stern, from the rudders, you can see the huge amounts of netting hanging down, and that is actually one complete pelagic trawl. And that trawl is actually a very, very big net that a big trawler hauls behind itself. The net is actually so big that when it's open in the water, you can take a 4-story high apartment house and put it in the mouth. And all that netting has caught on the boat, and that is actually very dangerous. If you would chance to go under the boat, if you tried to come out into the top side of the boat, you would end up in the trawl. You think of yourself, I'm carrying all these tanks on my back, under my arm, the big camera with light sticking out of it. It's nothing would be easier than get that tangled up in the trawl. You can actually see there are 2 dead seals in the netting. So, you got multitudes of tanks and valves, and you're a very clumsy thing under the water. There's nothing sleeker than a seal, and even they got caught in that. So you need to have the eyes on the back of your head. Approaching the conning tower, one of the problems is this resuspension of sediment, this milky mist, which could be just like a half a meter or several meters from the bottom. Here it's about 1.5 meters, and it's like the boat would be disappearing into mist. And the problem with this stuff is that it's very light, and it just reflects all the light back. It's really difficult for filming. When you go back towards the deck and look back down at the conning tower and the flag platform, it's right here that you can actually see the rectangular part, the box. This is what we came here for. That was like one of these big things you feel like yelling under the water, but you can't do that since you'll get water in your mouth. Okay. Tell you what, boys and girls, that was some dive. You don't get to do this every day. The old school is not completely over the hill yet. It's in the can, man.
It's in the can.
visibility was quite good enough at the end of the conning tower. We actually could make the box.
Yes.
And it's a good thing the light was on the side, so there's a bit of a shadow. You can make it out. Is the smoking gun. And man, I can tell you, I was so happy when I was looking through the viewfinder, shooting this footage, and I saw, okay, there it is. The same thing as on the photos.
Quite sure that now we have the identity and the mission is accomplished, and we have solved this puzzle that has been kind of circulating in the air for so many years. Overall, that was a success, and we were able to accomplish that what we were actually looking for. We have good footage, and combined with Jooni's photographs, I believe that the mystery has been now solved. We have U-745 here, right below us.
They were sure they'd found and identified the last victims of a Finnish minefield. Ironically, the boat that laid it was believed to have been destroyed by a Finnish mine, possibly one of its own.
We had been diving these submarines, and we knew that, okay, these submarines went down because they hit mines laid down by Louhi, and it is essential for the whole story to know where Louhi is.
The Louhi was one of the Finnish Navy's first ships. By 1945, it was showing signs of age.
It was old ship, old design, it was leaking, and it was rolling badly if there was bad weather, and it was not very seaworthy.
After laying mines in January 1945, it was sailing back to port, but never made it home.
And suddenly there was an explosion under Louhi's keel, somewhere in the right side and stern. Many people heard some kind of knock, and then there was a huge explosion in the aft. Most likely it was a mine.
When I was a younger diver, of course, people would talk about the Louhi, which was the last ship that Finnish Navy lost in the war.
I think it is a matter of pride, and it was a matter of feeling really bad that if it was fact that Louhi was indeed sunk by our own mines.
And the whole thing was a little bit of an embarrassment.
There are stories here and there, but no one really had kind of collected all the information together and located the wreck and done investigations out there and seen that what could be the most probable cause of the sinking.
A final wartime mystery was about to be solved. Did the Finnish mine layer, the Louhi, fall victim to one of its own mines?
Louhi is an interesting wreck because location of Louhi is marked in the sea charts. It's been there for ages, but there's no shipwreck in that spot. This whole story was so remarkable that we thought, okay, it's time to solve this mystery. So we applied for a permit to do a seabed search in the location where we thought the Louhi would have sunk.
What we're about to do here is we're going to dive a wreck which superficially would look like a very insignificant warship. It's actually the unsung hero of the submarine warfare here in the Baltic Sea.
They traced the route from the minefield back to port, sweeping the seabed with sonar to find the historic wreck.
Something starts to show up in a sonar, and looking at it, okay, it's a ship, and all bits and pieces were falling together, and I had to hold my breath because I just wanted to yell, guys, hey, come down.
Official permission was granted for an exploratory dive.
Is that okay? Okay, I'm out of here.
We came to the bridge of Louhi and saw the deck cannon out there, and it was quite obvious that, okay, this is it. This can't be anything else. There's nothing like this missing in this area. It was pristine water and amazing sight, seeing the whole deck and deck gun and bow and everything, and the bridge, everything at once out there. We swam around the boat and saw the bow, and there's minesweeping equipment, and everything was just like expecting it to be like. We noticed that the stern is very badly damaged. The deck has just blown up out there. A lot of bent metal and details are missing. Must have been just tremendous explosion under the keel, and this missing of decking supports.
It's actually much more probable that it was instead torpedoed.
There might have been a torpedo which exploded very close to the hull of Louhi, about 7-8 meters towards the front from the propellers. That's where the machine room is, and that's where the strongest sounds are generated from. That's the location where it actually did hit.
More evidence surfaced to support their theory. Research uncovered intriguing records of German communications.
What was found in the archives, the journals and the reports to the High Command, in which was reported that U-370 actually torpedoed Louhi. They fired a torpedo at a Finnish mine-laying ship, 1147. The Louhi log and the survivors tell that there was an explosion on board Louhi in 1250. So there's over an hour difference. But then, of course, one has to take into account that a German ship has its log in German time. Germany is a little more to the west, so it's 1 hour behind the Finnish time. And this explains the difference. So it was like 3 minutes, which is actually the typical running time for a torpedo.
The record had been set straight, and honor restored to an unsung hero of the Finnish Navy. The Louhi didn't blunder into one of its own mines, but was sunk by a U-boat torpedo. It also scored an important victory. Its mines had sunk 2 technically superior Nazi U-boats in the dying days of the Second World War.
Story altogether, this old ship, which is technically outdated, but still kind of, it was the first ship of the independent Finnish Navy. This old steamship gets hit by an acoustic torpedo, the state-of-the-art weapon of that time, shot by a German U-boat, again, state-of-the-art war machine. And there's this battle of old steamer against Grey Wolf. Although she sank, Louhi also was able to sink 2 German U-boats, and the operation was successful.
As you look at those submarines or other wrecks on the seabed, they're dark and lonely places. There are no bad guys or good guys anymore. Just young men who went out in the prime of their life to serve their country. They died in the process. So I think it's only just that the truth be told and their story be told to everybody. It's only the wreck that tells the last line of the story. It cracks the fog of war. Now we know where your boys are buried. They're there, you can pay your respects and you can put an end to the story. There's an old Russian proverb that says something like, the war is not over until the last of the fallen soldiers has been buried. And in a way, I feel that this is what we're doing.